Futurama Comic Issue 17. Thankfully, after Cubert has a bunch of stilted recap dialogue, he gets glared at and explains that he narrates when he's nervous. Bender and Fry run off to enjoy having the city to themselves, with Fry holding a brick and stealing ice cream. At least he gets brain freeze for it. It's no wonder he wants to stay friends with Bender, apparently he's no better than him. Swords would have security cameras, so they'd get caught and punished after everyone inevitably gets sent back to Earth. It's relatable that Bender wants to bounce on the beds in the bed store. I guess the heavy water bed is supposed to be for aliens, who would appreciate the hard carbon rods and are immune to radiation. Naturally, Leela's upset at losing her parents, and Cubert's comforted by Leela, but he's not sad that he lost his father. It's just the stink from her parents' house. She decides to push him in the filthy recycling pit as a punishment. I guess the future has cures for whatever he'd get from that, so that's why she thinks it'll be fine. Bender has a sculpting laser and has to tell Fry to keep his pants on. It makes sense that he'd want to take advantage of there being no people around to run around pantless. Bender makes the Statue of Liberty look like its face. Then Bender and Fry play hide and seek, and Fry was found because of a heat-seeking missile at a military surplus store that he stupidly risked killing Fry with. Somehow Fry's not killed by it, and instead he runs into a flag from an alien who wants to take over the planet because it's got no one to fight back against him. The aliens want to enslave them. This is a surprising turn of events. I figured the aliens would only come into the story as the ones that kidnapped Earth's population. I guess they knew to show up right away because they're always keeping the Earth scanned to see how many people it had. And yet they believe Fry that they have 100 people on Planet Express. It only takes 100 people to intimidate them into not invading. It's amusing that Bender said, "How about 50 really fat people?" and got told no. It cuts to Fry being slapped by Leela, and he says, "Okay, fine, then you come up with another way for us to repopulate the planet." It still wasn't justified of her, but it's not meant to be taken seriously since they move on from it right away. Bender suggests a cloning tank, but she's been using it for pickling because you can't get good gherkins here. Huh? Cubert says Farnsworth's catchphrase, which is surprising and charming, especially since Farnsworth created him as a clone. And he says he found 3 broken pieces of a new invention that were recently used. And he's getting strong chronoton readings, the kind used in time machines. He somehow doubts the odds of that and then gets grabbed by a pterodactyl or whatever from a time portal. It's creative that everyone was sucked back in time instead of kidnapped by aliens. Somehow the alien queen considers carpeting the oceans when that obviously destroy the water cycle on planet. She says she loved what they did on Trading Galaxies last week when they changed the color of a planet's rings. It turns out Cubert wasn't taken back in time, so the pterodactyl gets killed by the alien queen, and the alien mistakenly calls that thing a dinosaur. The time machine was activated when the pieces were put together, even though they're missing a part. Bender then pushes Fry into a portal with cavemen just to save him and say sorry, so it was just a joke of his. Cubert then calls them on his wrist phone and says he's been enslaved into hauling away garbage. He says the time hole could become unstable and tear apart space-time without the missing piece, and gets whipped. He says Einstein sarcastically, and they temporarily get Einstein to them. Lucky for them. But since he was being sarcastic and Leela figured that out, he's told to go back in the hole, and all he has to say is that the future is grumpy. Bender gets asked how he tied the time vortex in a knot. Lampshading it doesn't excuse the Deus Ex Machina. It'd make more sense to have an invention that can do that. But at least it's amusing that it was lampshaded. The alien's wife wants the horizon to be vertical, which is somehow possible but expensive. These two have always been one-dimensional evil alien invaders, so they don't really deserve to be called by name as if they're people every time. That and I forgot their names because it's been so long. What kind of a name is Lur anyways? It's interesting that he finds out Cubert's a clone because he sees that he doesn't have a belly button. And she says bioengineered food is bad for you to get him to leave him alone. If cloning technology is advanced enough to make Cubert, You'd think Farnsworth would have a way to make him have a belly button too. Since Kubert's a lot younger than Farnsworth, that means he started as a fetus and had to be aged up. And fetuses have umbilical cords which would have to be cut, so he'd still have a belly button. Creatively, it turns out that the pterodactyl got eaten by the alien, and Fry tries to fool the aliens with a bunch of mannequins from Bender's looting and old shells of Zoidbergs. And Layla at least justifies their stupid plan because the aliens' eyes aren't great. I guess they were just whispering so they couldn't be heard here. Still, Fry should have known they could just scan the planet for intelligent life again. Of course he does that again to count the people and sees there's only 4. Bender then takes the tricorder and writes 100 on it and fools the king. Good thing it was explained that his vision sucks. At least his wife is suspicious. She asks to speak to a random sample of Earthlings and Bender holds an on-the-lam disguise kit. So the crew members fool her with a bunch of disguises, but at least here it's kind of believable because they're talking to aliens with barely any experience with Earthlings, so they'd all look the same to them. The aliens would assume that they only look similar to the previous Earthlings by coincidence because they're the same species. And it was explained that the aliens have bad vision, but they're still right in front of them. Although, also, the characters are probably speaking in disguised voices too. At least this is a creative surprise, because the cloning machine would have been the way more predictable solution of repopulating the Earth, but also create a long-term problem because the clones would stick around. I didn't know Leela looked too old to be in college. Fry explains amusingly, she keeps failing. She's really stupid. Bender says Fry's her teacher and really stupid himself. I giggled at the next panel. The wife said she thought Fry was a priest instead, and Bender immediately says, it's a religious school. Really strict. And Fry says, yeah, if you fail midterms, you go to hell. So the king gets convinced to leave, even though his wife is still suspicious, and he explains that he's just following intergalactic law to never conquer inhabited planets. It's impressive that he's good enough or smart enough to follow that law. I'd expect these two to have conquering planets be a constant thing of theirs. And even in the show it was referenced that Earth's been conquered before. He thanks Fry and says that renovating this planet would have cost him a fortune. That's another creative surprise. Fry says, so we didn't fool you with our brilliant disguises? And he laughs at them. And this was foreshadowed because she kept saying she wanted to renovate the planet. So we actually didn't get the idiot ball just to have the plot progress. Wow, this story has a lot of good things about its writing. Leela sees a videotape on a bone, and Bender can only play videotapes in beta for some reason. And they see Farnsworth in Bender's eyes. Predictably, every sentient being on Earth was sent back in time to the age of the dinosaurs. It doesn't make sense that Farnsworth would have done this by accident during a chronoton experiment he'd have nothing to gain from doing. I guess his miscalculation was that he didn't want himself sent back in time. How does an experienced genius have a miscalculation? It'd make more sense if he did this on purpose because he loves doomsday devices. He says he got the camera from Taurus that got eaten, and Hermes' wife threatens him, thankfully calling him out. He says he'll send a pterodactyl through the time vortex with a tape and their coordinates. Wait, coordinates are determined by a satellite, and there isn't a satellite above the Earth in dinosaur times. How would they narrow down their coordinates? He explains that the reason he broke the time machine in pieces was for safety after Bender tried to use it to stop the Big Bang and blackmail the universe. It's an amusing thing to keep to an off-screen mention. Farnsworth was only able to grab one piece of the time machine before he got sucked into the time vortex. He smartly says there'll be a reward if the other 3 parts get sent back to him. But it's dumb of him to say, small reward. Fry and Bender are surprisingly smart here. Bender wants to do more looting and vandalism, and Fry's right, the past isn't going anywhere. They have all the time in the world. By this point in time, their friends have already lived out their entire lives in dinosaur times. Bender tells them to look in the wallet he stole off him earlier, and Fry sees the picture he keeps in here of Fry, Leela, and Bender. Leela and Bender will cease to exist if they don't help their professor. But wait, that doesn't make any sense. Why does Kubert think it does? Farnsworth isn't their father. All of those people are future people.
not past people that had to exist for Leela and Bender to be born. And of course, Bender's a robot, and Leela is a mutant. Hubert says they still have time to save Farnsworth before the effects become permanent, saying that when someone time travels, they make ripples that don't get to them right away. But they would get to them right away. They're in the future. The time travel ripples would have had thousands of years. Bender's just a bad influence on Fry. So Leela forces them to help. Hubert's shocked to learn that Bender tied the time hole in a knot, and Bender says amusingly to sign a waiver releasing him from all liability for anything he did first. There's 3 of them now. Hubert says amusingly that's as far from a good thing as possible. They wouldn't have 3 holes here because he wouldn't have been able to bend a non-solid object. Fry says amusingly that if he remembers his Boy Scout training, the best thing to do when you're attacked by time holes is stay still. Leela trusts him out of desperation to know what to do, and they all consent in them without Hubert. This intriguing story was full of creative surprises. It would have been too predictable if every Earthling was kidnapped by aliens. Instead, it was Farnsworth's fault, and he sent them back to dinosaur times, where the oxygen on Earth would be at such a high level that they'd all die immediately. Or at least, it would be at a different level, because scientists can't agree on what exactly the oxygen level was at back then. Either way, they'd all die. The dinosaurs wouldn't be able to live at the same time as they are because of that. It'd make more sense if the specific dinosaur times they were sent to was after the year 2000, and the so-called dinosaurs are just genetic mutants, which would explain why they don't have feathers. Anyways, after Fry and Bender celebrate the fact that the Earth is abandoned in plenty of different ways, it was nice that the alien King Lur trying to take over the planet didn't actually get fooled by the disguises and just wanted to avoid being cost a lot of money by his wife from it. That really humanizes him. And then because Bender somehow bent the time vortex into 3 different holes, which didn't happen right away for some reason, they all get sent through them at the end. I never thought the comic would bother having a story arc in the main issues.